There we go. Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is Michael Bennett, founder and trustee of Pure for Planet Global Mission. Let me say that again, Pure for Planet Global Mission. We have been operating for some time now, but in the last few years, primarily last year, we started doing videos and interviews and so forth, and really getting deeper into this whole idea of what is a sovereign, what is a trustee, and all the different matrices that we're dealing with in the world that are suppressing our ability to be God's trustees, that have to do with the legal fiction, as well as the medical world, as well as the banking world, and lots of solutions and ways that we're going about trying to transform that. I've been actively involved with gold for some time now to do that, and learned a lot of stuff along the way. Also other organizations that are working on humanitarian efforts. And maybe a month ago, between Hawaii and Los Angeles, I got a very clear message from the creator that it was time to join forces with Darren Paul in the United Kingdom, who's been in the sovereign and natural law. He'll explain the difference between law and lore, trust industry or world for over 36 years. And very clear message that it was time to begin this dialogue. Have been bouncing back and forth between basically corporation souls, which I have, religious trust, 508s, and so forth. And Darren and I have had some very powerful conversations about the importance of the sovereign and natural law trust. So today's intention is just to begin to demystify the world that we're living in, that was created by the word legal, and by the idea of fiction, and by, really more importantly, the way the British use words to get us to believe in a world that was created for us. And so it's really been quite amazing to see that. So I'd like to bring him on now to just discuss a little bit about his background, make some distinctions. And the purpose of this call is not to engage you in a trust. The purpose of this call is to see who's interested in being engaged with a trust and learning about who we really are as trustees. So with that, Darren Paul, would you like to unmute yourself and be the host, and I'll be the co-host?
Done. Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael. I've unmuted myself now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So thanks for inviting me on, and hopefully I'll be some use to you guys. I'll just give you some background information about myself so that you know. I'll not bore you to tears with it, but I've been involved in trust planning since 1989, so quite a while. And the emphasis of a trust, was always explained to me when I was being trained up that it's a great British invention, because it was the envy of the world, the UK trust law, because it's steeped in centuries of presidents and law presidents. And the overall aim of any trust is to protect assets for somebody. That's the overall aim. And so that's something that kind of gelled with me. It was like, yeah, that makes sense, and it's great that people should know all about that and the options available. And so, what I didn't know at those in those times about jurisdiction, I didn't understand jurisdiction. I just thought the world went round, and wherever you were in the world, that's your jurisdiction. And so I didn't understand that the difference between legal, legal, and lore, but I worked in the statutory field. I worked with all the tax codes, all the legislation, all the as we have them in the UK, acts and statutes. In the US, it's commercial codes and tax codes and USCs or whatever. And so I worked very much in that world. So I understand that world pretty well because I worked in it for the vast majority of my life in that jurisdiction. And then I learned about what true jurisdiction is. and that there's a jurisdiction that's outside of legal, and we're going to call it for this today, for the sake of simplicity, LORE, which was, and some people will call it common law, but that's not actually natural. It's not true. What LORE is when people couldn't read or write, the elders passed on, the Indigenous elders passed on the information about what really truly goes on verbally. And that's why it's called LORE, like folklore. Yeah. And so that has got more substance and value than the last, say, 200 years of legal. And for those that want to do a little bit of research, if you look at the Encyclopedia Britannica, I think it's 1893, it actually says that the word legal is the undoing of God's law. That's what legal is. So effectively, we have been now very, very highly involved with lots of different organizations explaining to people the difference between legal and if your people want a legal trust and they want to be in a statutory jurisdiction, we can explain to them about that and how to protect in that jurisdiction. And then if people want to do LORE, then we can do the same thing. We can say how to set yourself up in that jurisdiction and operate under God's law. Does that help as an introduction, Michael?
I think that's excellent. That begins the whole conversation about language and the deception that's been played on humanity as far as legal and lore and this whole thing of fiction that we're dealing with. Sorry, it's interesting. All the calls start coming all at one time. And so we should shut the phone off, or at very least turn it away. And so I believe that this is the beginning. This is the beginning of a real authentic conversation, Darren, in terms of what we're dealing with and the pool that we're swimming in. So let's continue with this whole idea about what's, decompression, de-understanding, declaration, and really invite people to understand the foundation of how a sovereign and natural law trust, the language, not the language, but the context behind it versus what we're dealing with currently in the trust law.
So that's a good question. So let's start from the beginning, right? A trust is created for somebody that wants to, who has an asset. Let's just say, for example, it's a painting. And I want that painting and I want to pass it on to, say, I've got a son and a daughter. Yeah. And so I'm going to let my son and daughter have it either when I pass, when I die, or at a certain age. So I say to Michael, I want you to be my trustee. I want you to make this happen. Okay. So I'm going to make a settlement and I'm going to draft a piece of paper up that says I settle this painting into this trust, and the stewardship and the protector of that trust is called the trustee, and that's Michael, and I'm asking Michael to be my trustee. So that, and I'm saying I want my children, so let's say Bob and Mary, to benefit from that by 2030. That's when I want them to have it. Okay. So I'm saying to Michael, will you look after this painting for the next 5 years? Make sure it's properly looked after, it's safe. And then in 2030, on this date, the 1st of January 2030, I'd like you to get in touch with Bob and Mary and say that I want them to have this painting. Okay? And I need you to insure it. I need you to make sure that it's always going to be there for them. Will you take that responsibility on?
Yes.
So now what we've got is we've got a if you like, a tri-patria agreement, as they would say in contract law. We've got a settler, Darren. He's got his painting. That's called is the trust res, or the corpus, the body. And we've got our trustee, Michael. And Michael's going to look after that and nurture it for me for my beneficiaries, which are Bob and Mary. Now, does that not sound like God's law to you? Is that not the same as man being granted dominion under Genesis? So man became the trustee of the earth and has to make it the upkeep of the earth and preserve it for the next generation. That's what man's doing. So God was the settler, the grantor of dominion, and the people, the elders, were the trustees, and the little ones, the son and daughters, were the beneficiaries. And that is in perpetuity, because as the young ones grow older and the elders pass on, then the young uns who now become the elders now become the trustees, and their offspring then become the beneficiaries. That is a trust. How to maintain the energetic imprint of something through the generations. And that's what God created. So we're just mirroring it.
And what did man create then?
Well, what man did, you see, because for a long, long time we couldn't read or write. So somebody had the great idea, and if you think about this logically, and this was around the 12th century in England, what we're going to do, we're going to codify or write the rule book on the basis that everybody will know what we said then, won't we? There's going to be no ambiguity. Now, for all you guys out there that sounds like that makes sense, yeah, if it's written down, then we can go back to writing it down, and then we know what was said, so we can go back to that as evidence, and then with everybody's under no illusion what was agreed. However, over 93% of the world at that point in time couldn't read or write. So although it sounds logical today, in 2025, in 1170 it wasn't. And it was used to subvert language. Because now, for example, if I say to you, I'm going to represent something, you might think, well, all right, he's acting for Michael. I'm going to represent Michael. Okay. But I might be, if I speak it and I say, I'm going to represent Michael, that means I'm going to show him again. That's not representing Michael. That's changing the language and the tone and how I spoke about it and my animation, you could then get from what that word meant. But when it's on a piece of paper and it just has those words, represent, you don't know what it means. You can only make an assumption. So the clever thing to do, whenever you're receiving mail and you're getting a letter or correspondence or notice, is you always ask this question. Can you please define the dictionary definition in use with this conveyance of grammar and the manual style in use? So what the manual style is the rule book as how we write. Do we write with capitals? Do we write all capitals? Do we write in sentence case? Do we use full stops? Do we use commas? When do we use them? Can we use italics? What does that mean? Can we put boxes around words or not? That's the manual style. And the dictionary definition is the language in use. So if I say to you, Michael, you're driving, and I'm using Black's Law Dictionary, that means you're operating a motor vehicle for commerce. If I use the Oxford English Language Dictionary, it means I'm just using a car to get about. I'm not conducting commerce. So there's a difference between that word in two different dictionaries. And for all you guys out there, all you've got to do now is just have a play with that and look at dictionary definitions and see what they say. And you'll all say they're slightly different. So the Romans 8:2 says the meaning of the words is the spirit of the law, and it meant it. If we don't know what we're writing and reading, then how do we know what we're obligated to? For me, that's quite logical.
Darren, how is it that all roads lead to Rome?
Because all roads lead to Rome, because everything, there's another saying, what is bought by Caesar's coin should be given back to Caesar, rendered to Caesar. So everything that you see in your US commercial codes and everything is all stems from Roman law, imperial Roman law. That's where it all comes from. That's why all roads lead to Rome.
So when we talk about this distinction of declaration, the D, let's drill down a little bit. I don't know if we flushed out enough between the trust law and the lore. And we talked yesterday about, I'm an attorney that practices at law. So let's drill down a little bit on lore and law and how that is different in terms of the relationship as a trustee and a sovereign.
Okay, so what law is about, what the difference between LAW and LORE? LAW, land, air, and water, right? Because the Romans knew that you could either be on land or you could be on water. So what they did is decided, well, we'll have a law of the land and a law of water then. So we've got Admiralty Law and we've got common law for the land. Okay? So they knew that. So LORE is about conscience and and substance, what your intention was. So that tells you that only something that's living and breathing can put their conscience and their energy to it. That's what LORE is, where LAW can be written down. Okay, so what we're talking about here is equity, and that is that he that does equity must come with clean hands. So equity is always about doing the right thing. Do others as you would want to do yourself. That's all those biblical principles are in there are talking about equity. So the difference between a sovereign law, if you want to call it that, LORE, is it works on equitable principles. Whereas LAW is always what's called the colour of law, which means it looks like law, but it isn't quite cut in the same. So I'll give you an example. In England, what they did is in 1066, William the Conqueror came over and beat Harold at Hastings, and so he took by the land by conquest. Well, that's against God's law to start with. Okay, and then he decided to put a lien against the British Isles or the England in them days by doing the Domesday Book. And so what they did then is then they invented common law, LAW. We already had common LORE with the Anglo-Saxons. And in Scotland, we had it with Caledonia and Alba. And in Southern Ireland, we had it with Brehon law. And to this day, the king swears a coronation oath to uphold the laws and customs of this realm. That's what he's talking about. The customs of this realm. Okay? So what they did is they brought in common LAW of the law of the land. And then in 1470, they brought in the Court of Chancery for Equity. So what they did is they brought in what was already created by the creator, God's law, but they made it man-made. So the difference with LAW is man-made interpretations and LORE is spiritual interpretations. That's the difference.
And when we talk about the sovereign law, the natural and sovereign law trust, we've broken it down into a couple things. Like you talked to me about, there's the intention and the spirit behind it, and then there's the actual assets. And so
Yes.
explain that in contrast to what people, because people, especially American consciousnesses, we have a lot of legal issues. We want to protect certain things. We're not, it's not taught to us in social studies. Somehow we've become a very legally frightened country. And so let's make a distinction between what's being pressed upon people, like, I got to protect everything, I got to take care of everything, versus what really is the actual, as a person who might be looking at a trust, what are you looking for in someone who says, I want to have a sovereign, I want to have a discussion about the actual consciousness of why I'm going to have a trust versus the practicality and the legalist. We can get into practicality, but let's talk about the reason and the people that we're looking for right now.
Okay, so when you talk about that, America's a legal country, but it's a legal country from the roots of England. And the
True,
roots of English law is from the roots of Roman law, if you
true,
say trace it back. And then if you go before Roman law, then you've got Indigenous, LORE, haven't you?
right, right,
Every country has that. We have that, yeah?
yeah.
So what we've got to remember is that the all paths lead to Rome. Is that what we're talking about here is that when you say the practicality, you said about I want to declare my assets and I want to do this. The first thing we've got to understand is you've got a Declaration of Independence, haven't you? Okay.
Do.
Now what does that mean? Because in one respect, Declaration of Independence is I'm telling you that I'm independent. That's it. But in another way, if you split the words up, declare, declaration, DE before every English word means to give up or to take away or to subtract. DE before that, deduct, devalue, decapitate is to take something away. So declaration is DE to take away, Claire is to speak, and ION is a contract or an agreement. So what we've got there is DE to take away the spoken agreement. So you have nothing. You have the illusion of an agreement, but the language tells you you haven't. Now, what we have to do there is to be smart, is when somebody says, well, I'm declaring something, that means I'm not speaking. Or do we use the English Oxford Language Dictionary? And that says that I am telling you something about myself. And without that disclosure, you don't know, you're just guessing. Now, independence, IN, no, DE to take away, pen to write or to enclose, ENCE is a contractual obligation. So you're fencing in a contractual obligation.
It
Yeah.
it is very hard to believe that the forefathers knowingly imprisoned us to the crown.
Well, that is a different another subject in its own right, and
Right,
that
but it
and I think for the US guys, that's quite a how can I put it, a controversial subject.
a
Yeah.
bridge too far, a bridge too far.
Yeah, if you talk to
It
my
does
friend Alan of Salisbury, he would tell you all about that and where the land of America, and you're seeing it a bit now with the political climate over there, is being brought out that it was leased back to the Crown in England, the three crowns. The three crowns are the Vatican, Washington, D.C., and the City of London.
which
They're
are
the
all
three
separate and
crowns.
sovereign land masses. They have nothing to do
Absolutely.
with England, nothing to do with Italy, and nothing to do with the United States. I
Yeah, I
understand.
mean England is nothing to do with the City of London. It's a separate state.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I think the
But
next
that is a very controversial subject, Michael,
it
and
is
we'll
it
not
is.
get into that,
No, so let me just do a little segue, folks. So this is the beginning of a dialogue that has to happen now as trustees. And this is offered by Pure for Planet Global Mission. That is my organization to essentially, give back healing to the planet and also to restore the sovereignty and the right of give me just a minute here, adverse possession to the First Nations people. And so we will be undertaking private membership with Pure for Planet in the very next future. There are a handful of people that have been involved the last year, but we'll be formalizing that in the next couple of weeks, probably by the middle of September, maybe the 1st of September. And a new evolution of that will be the trustee society. I think I named it the other day with I think Lydia and I were talking about it. Let me just verify that. And Darren and I are combining forces to be able to offer what he's been doing now for 36 years to the private members, and also to be offering a curriculum so that you can understand in reality what's going on here with this whole world of trust, because there's practical reasons around real estate assets and so forth of why that's vital. And that's not this call, but this is the beginning of that. And if there's more interest, then we're gonna lean into that. So what did I call Sovereign Master Trust? Trust Society Institute, Trustee Society Institute will be the new ministry, and that will be under the membership, private membership of Pure for Planet. So Pure for Planet will have a master trust, and you will be coming under the trusteeship and the overseership of Pure for Planet. We will also be finding that or birthing that with the First Nations cosmology in mind. And so that's part of the Maori conversation I'm engaged right now, which is another level of jurisdiction. So I think at this point, Darren, let's open it up for questions. Is there anything else that we need to put on the table? Maybe.
Can I just say one thing, Michael,
Yeah,
about
please. Yeah.
because you did mention about legal and
Yeah.
property and assets. A sovereign law trust understands a critical difference between a LAW trust. Because an LAW trust is all about protecting assets and making sure it's going to be there for children and well, the problem is when you talk about children, they're wards of state anyway. So there's a lot of tricks in the parents of the rental. They're renting the kids back off the state. But we can get into those.
Don't walk over that one. That's huge. That's about as controversial as Declaration of Independence. Pair rental. Break that down.
Parental, so a pair for rent.
Oh
because what happens is when you certificate, you give up. That's what the Pope Nicholas III did in about 1490 something. He said that all baptisms had to be certificated. So that was another way of because what they're doing is on a baptism is that the church is recognizing that the soul's entered the body, the spirit's entered the body, and then if you certificate that baby, then you're giving away the soul to the body, to the church. Okay, so a certificate is to give away, an application is to plea. So sovereign folk don't make applications because they're not pleading, because they already have inalienable rights. They already have rights given by the Creator. So they don't have to plead for anything to a corporate institute. But if you do make an application, and every time you send in a form, even if you're getting some motor insurance, you put in an application. You're making a plea. Okay? So all these words have double meanings. So when you have your baby and it's certificated, it's giving the baby's soul away to the powers that be. And guess what you do? You birth it by the midwife. So the midwife, the midshipman, and you're birthing it as the ship's manifest into the harbour. That's what you do. But that's a big subject. So one of the first things
for the pair to rent.
For the pair to rent it back, because the pair now look after it. They look after the baby. So when you call a child is a ward of state. Okay, that's quite common knowledge, and so that's what we don't call them children. We call them sons and daughters.
Right. So let's.
So the tricks are in the wording. So if you're writing sovereignly, then you can't get tripped up into the jurisdiction. So the differences between a natural law, we'll call it a natural law, a divine law trust, LORE, is that we understand that we're just here as stewards for this plane of earth. We're just the stewards to pass it on in good upkeep and good care for the next generations. It's not about holding on to this property that's mine and this antique painting that's mine, and I don't want anybody to get hold of it because when I'm gone, it'll be irrelevant. What I'm doing is passing on a legacy of energetic legacy to the next generation. That's what I'm doing. Whereas if I'm in LAW, all these bricks and mortar mean massive things to me, and I just want to pass it on to somebody and not the state. But I'm already in the state.
Yeah, let's, we started a little bit late, so I'm gonna ask for a couple more minutes here. So let's just say this and then we'll turn it up to Q&A. So we talked about that the way the natural and sovereign and natural law trust works is there's a spirit, and then there's the part that's necessary to actually open up the checking account and do the financial things. So let's address that. And then I think that should take us to where we need to go. And the fact that we have curriculum, we'll be putting curriculum together. We've got 3 levels of this trust. And again, we're not going to speak about the trust today, but just so people have, like, all human beings to, like, what's in it for me? How much is it going to cost? What are the details? So I'd like them to know that there's no limitation. It's a global situation. So it just matters on your particular country's code, whether you're in the UK, you're the USA, you're in New Zealand, doesn't matter. You will address that as part of the foundation and part of the creation. So let's talk about that part about the spirit versus the asset.
Okay, do you want me to say something there then, Michael? Yeah.
Yeah, say something about that, and then just how
we're talking about
allows
equity.
how that
Yeah.
allows them the ability to go in with the EIN number in the US and open up a checking account and begin that whole
Okay.
process that people want to do.
Yeah, so the thing is with the truth movement, it's kind of like, let's divorce ourselves from the state. Let's divorce. They're horrible. We don't want to be part of them. That doesn't work. Right? What you've got to do is you've got to act honorably. So therefore, when you do what we do with the natural law trust is we create a bridge with that world.
Right.
We don't attach ourselves to it. We just create a bridge so that we can still have a check account. We can still get our bus pass. We can still get a passport and travel, right? And so, but we're not stepping in their jurisdiction. So the key is to understand that I need, out of necessity, Michael, a bank account.
Right.
Yeah. I need one out of necessity. And so therefore I'm going to have one out of necessity, but I'm going to build a bridge between the natural law trust and that jurisdiction. That's all I'm doing. So the natural law trust sits under God's law. Let's just say that's a jurisdiction. And a bank account in Wells Fargo Bank is in the American Constitution or the United States of America Corporation. That's where that is, right? So now I've got a bridge between the divine law and that jurisdiction so that we can talk to each other.
Got it.
So it's like a translator, yeah?
Okay.
So that we're not sticking 2 fingers up to the state and saying we don't want to be with you, because that ain't gonna work. You've got to work in honor, you've got to work in clean hands, and you've got to, know who you are, but also know that you've got to stay safe at the same time. So that's what we do. It's not out there to kind of crash the whole system.
Right. So one of the things we talked about and is that we're looking for a particular type of person, and maybe you can define that for a second. Who is it that has been for the last 36 years? You said there are 2 types of people that have come to you. So let's just talk about that for a second. Who are those 2 types of people? And then someone can ask the question, what are the trust costs, whatever it is, and then we're not going to get into the cost today, but we'll break it down into there's a basic, a standard, and a premium, and they offer different things. So first of all, who are the 2 types of people that you're looking for?
Okay. Now, what we've got to be careful there, Michael, when we talk about person, right? A person is a fiction, a creation of statute, by the way. So we are people.
I know.
Right. Yeah. But to answer your question, having done this a long time, there's basically when you look at setting up a trust, let's talk bluntly here. You're buying a set of pieces of paper. It's not buying a brand new shiny car or a nice house with a nice garden and a swimming pool that you can sit there and look at the fruits of your labor and say, how great is that? Or a holiday that you're going to go somewhere and have a great time. It's not that exciting. It's a piece of paper. Now, because of that, and it's going to cost dollar or whatever, yen or British pound or whatever, there's two types of people. The people that can just see the cost and not the benefit. So they're not really there's nothing wrong with them at all, but that's not really a good idea for them to have a trust. Yeah, because then the other type of person, I'm using the statutory name there, then another type of people is those that can see the benefit, who have this kind of, it's in the heart that they want to leave a legacy to the next generations as the trustees of this land. So therefore, they want to honour that. So they don't look at the cost, they look at the benefit. Yeah? If you're just going to look at the cost, then it's a poor return on your investment. But if you look at the legacy exchange, then it's a massive return on your investment. And it's just about that mindset. That's it.
Yeah, and it's the spiritual aspect of it too. So I'm going to go ahead and I do want to keep to my word here. We started a little bit late, but I'm going to turn it over to you for Q&A. So Darren, thank you for up to this point. Again, folks, our intention here is to lay down some verbiage and conversations to see if this speaks to you. And then we're going to move into a breakaway situation within the next week or so to people that want to have a bigger conversation about the reality of this. And what does it really mean? Because you have other things floating around in your mind, like 508s and, religious trusts and so forth. And this supersedes all that. This goes right to the direct relationship as a trustee. There are benefits to the different organizations and different offerings. I've prayed about this extensively, and I am still going to feature a guest. I got to change the date now, maybe next Wednesday also, for about religious trust and expert in corporate souls. And I have been a little remiss in reminding him. I was going to talk with him tomorrow, but I'll get that changed if there's an interest in that. But I've really put my direction now behind forming a shared ministry with Darren. So what questions do we have at this point? There are no questions off the table. We have absolutely have a commitment in what he does. There's really not a, shall I say, a limitation in terms of people that aren't available to this. There's a basic, a standard, and a premium based on your assets. And so I'd like to think that he has, and the ministry will price things that will really allow people to engage. We want people to engage if that's what you want. And then there's curriculum that can be a part of this conversation so that you can really understand not only why is a sovereign and natural law trust important, but who are you in the matter of this trust? And so there's a spiritual component to this, there's a practical component to this, and this is all part of the services of the private membership of Pure for Planet. So global mission. So does anybody have any questions? If you do, please just go to the chat down below where it says raise your hand, and I'll raise your hand and I'll unmute you. And if you don't have any questions, we'll continue. But I suspect that somebody has some questions. So a little technology here. So go to the little heart at the bottom of the screen, and you'll see raise hand. And anybody have any comments, questions, thoughts, inspirations? There's quite a few of you on this call, so don't everybody shout at one time. This is not meant to be everything answered in one call. This is a temperature test, basically, and seeing who's truly interested and what knowledge are you coming from and where do we need to go with you. No questions? Really? Liddy, no questions? Fire, Glory, and Fire, no questions? We're doing that great of a job?
I have a question.
Okay,
I don't know where the
Jules,
hand thing is, but okay. My question pertains to what you were talking about with the certificate, with the birth certificate.
Yes, a new mother speaking.
Yes, I am due with our first child in a couple months. And so I was wondering what would be a better alternative than to get the child a birth certificate or like a baptism certificate or whatnot, and still be able to have them like travel outside the US and, maybe work later on or whatnot. Like, what are some alternative options for that?
That's to you, Darren.
You want me to answer that? Okay.
Yeah.
So the first thing you've got to be aware of is that when you decide whether you're going to have a birth certificate or not for your child, or the son or daughter, I'll explain a one quick story. A lady, and it's quite an interesting story to answer this question, so it'll be a bit of a roundabout way, but just bear with me. So this lady had 3 children, and 2 of them were birth certificated, and the youngest one wasn't, right? And the authorities wasn't happy. And so they did a dawn raid on a house, take the kids away from her, and she was distraught. Her and her husband were distraught. And that was about 7 in the morning. It was a dawn raid. It was early morning. They knocked the house door down and took the children away. And then at 10 o'clock, they brought the youngest uncertificated child away back. And she said, we've got to give you them back, give him back, because he's not one of ours. That's what they said. The moral of that story is, if you're going to not certificate your baby, then you've got to make sure that you haven't really got a history where they can come at you and pull you to pieces. And if you have, then it's probably you've got to be very careful in what you do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So
Yeah.
that would involve
Good.
being, the private membership conversation, Jules, which you already are a private member. And so that would
Yeah.
involve a deeper conversation with the new ministry, which is the Trust Society Institute. And so we can have that conversation with Darren.
So yeah, what I'm leading to there is what Michael's saying, because if I'm in the jurisdiction of the state, then everything that is owned, everything bought with Caesar's coin is rendered to Caesar, unless it's bought by God. And then if it's the property of God, then it's rendered to God. So the baby was always a creation of the divine. Okay, you had that 3-way thing: the mum, the dad, their chromosomes, and the spark of life from the divine. Okay. But once you certificate it, you bring it into a corporation. So if you're already not that if you're already that corporation, if you're John Paul Smith or Mary Jane Doe, and you've got the surname, and you've done nothing about that surname, then you're a product of statute. You're what was it called, a creature of statute. So you haven't any rights, you're a citizen. So you're a slave to the corporation. You're an employee of that corporation. That's why you have an EIN number. Okay? Employee identification number, because you're an employee. So unless you've done something to divorce yourself from that system, then you are in that system. Now, you've got, if you, all you guys out there, read the maxims of law. It's not a book, but it's the rules of law. And I'll send you some now. And these all go back to the ecclesiastical canons. He that does not assert his rights has none. So if you're walking around as Mary Jane Doe, the Doe is the surety name, the surname. So that's what binds you to the crown, which is DC, Vatican, and London City, and you haven't done anything to rebut that presumption, then he that does not deny admits. And he that does not assert his rights has none. And equity does not aid a volunteer. So you've got to set the record straight, and you do that with clean hands. So that's what I was alluding to when I said you got to do certain things before you don't certificate the baby, because you've not got to be in their jurisdiction.
Excellent. Another question. So ladies and gentlemen,
I have a question.
What's that?
I have a question.
Yes,
This is
yes, sir.
David
Hi,
Cobb.
David.
I have some friends here in the States that are sovereign, and they taught me a lot a few years ago. I mean, quite a few years ago, that our Social Security number, you're absolutely correct, on your birth certificate, you become a property of the state. Your parents don't even own you. Now, what they did is they became sovereign within the United States, which means that they're not a U.S. citizen. They can get a driver's license, but don't necessarily need a driver's license. They can't be drafted into war. They don't pay U.S. taxes, so forth and so on. Are you on, am I correct on this?
Right. Yeah. The one thing that I would say in today's consciousness, we've got to have balance. So that might be true, and what they're telling you is correct. However, the difficulty is that you've got this overseeing entity called the state that doesn't want to let you go. Okay, so therefore, what we sort of are more in line with is working with the system, if you like, so that so if we don't have a passport and a driving license, some people can say, well, I can get about, I can go, I can do what I do, I'm not going to go abroad. But what we do in sense is we just rebut the presumption, but we still work with those things that we need to work with. Like, for example, we want to, like in England, if you don't have a passport, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to Spain. You're not going taking your kids on holiday or anything like that. So that's about balance. The analogy I'll use is a game of Monopoly. What you've got to do is you've got to set yourself aside. Are you the iron, the little dog, or the car, or the boat on the Monopoly board that's going round conducting commerce? That's your fiction, that's your surname. The guy that's throwing the dice and moving the piece is the man or woman. And what you've got to do is you've got to separate that presumption that you are the same. Yeah?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Now let me. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me say.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go on. You carry on.
Okay. Now I'm not going to take up much of your call. Now, what my friends also did was those little red numbers that are on the back of your Social Security card. You know the numbers I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a bank account associated with everyone's Social Security number. Am I correct or not?
Yeah.
And there's quite a
yeah.
bit of money in that account from the day in which you were born and so forth and so on, which most people didn't know that, including myself, until they educated me, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of them was able to get into that account, right? It came with life threats. It came, his whole life changed once he did it, right? He was a threat, right? But he's a pretty smart guy. Now, with that all said and done, from what I'm understanding is that you're creating a bridge, as you say, with an EIN number, right? Which means that you're still in the system. You still have your birth certificate. You still have your Social Security number. Now that trust is developed to protect you and your family through the regular system, if you will. We'll just call it the Roman system or the UCC, Universal Commercial Code, or whichever way, right? Because it's basically what it is, right? So with that being said, how do you protect your land and your assets through this trust when you're not sovereign because you're still part of the system?
Okay, that's a good question. So the correlation is that if you're part of the system because you've got an EIN number and you've got a bank account and this, that, and the other, you're part of the system. But that's not actually true. If you're going in part of the system and saying, "Can I have a bank account, please?" Yeah, great, okay, without any notice or without any preamble, let's say, then yeah, you are part of the system. But if I write to, say, for example, the register for titles, okay, what we would do is we would have that title. So you've got the name of John Paul Smith, we'll call it, yeah. So we would claim the title of Smith, and we would rebut the presumption that John Paul Smith is in land, the tenant for life, That's what he is in land. So if you've got real estate property, that's what he is generally across the world, the tenant for life. So we'd write to the whoever is the registrar in that area, and we would rebut that presumption, and we'd use their local laws to be able to rebut that presumption, because in every one of their laws there is remedy. Now, I might do it under Universal Commercial Code. I could do it that and be the secured party creditor. I would just look at the local laws to what I've got to do that. And the same with the checking account. I get my checking account, and then I'd explain to them that I'm a man, and that the title for the surname is in a private trust. And so now what I've got is I've got the legal title in the private trust run by the trustees, and I've got the beneficial title with the beneficiaries. So now I've perfected the title. No one can do that. No one can own or do anything with that legal title. And how I did is I separated myself by notice. So I did a reversionary notice, and I explained to the powers that be, the bank and the Social Security people and whoever you want, IRS, and said, this is me. And the legal title now rests in Darren Paul's private trust. And that takes that, and so now, because you've got to have that legal title, and you don't want that legal title joint, when that legal title, right, guys, and we're talking about legal title and beneficial title, there's always two titles in everything you've got, whether it's a bank account, whether it's a piece of real estate. There's always two titles. There's a legal title and the beneficial title. And what you've got to do is separate them, but have control over them. How you do that is you put the legal title in your private trust and sit that with the trustees, and the beneficial title is with the beneficiaries. Now you've perfected the title. At the moment, when you're the state presence, they've got the legal title in the birth certificate, and they don't care about your beneficial title because it's got nothing without the legal title. That's how they do it.
Okay. And you would do this through the universal UCC, because
well, in America you can do, we can't do that in the UK, but you can in America.
Right, because
you can sort of. You can in the.
I'm sorry, but then it becomes global when you use the UCC for the most part, right?
Well, I mean, there's different ideas about whether it is. If you go into the United Kingdom statute book, they'll say that's not part of us, but it is, because 192 countries actually subscribe to it. So there's a lot of kind of like misinformation out there. But the fact is what we've got to do, whether we do it under UCC, which is a Uniform Commercial Code, or do I do it under God's law and perfect the title under divine law? Well, we go to divine law. Because you can't argue with that. You can't argue with that. You cannot argue with that jurisdiction, because because they all do, all their codes and everything swear on an oath to God, don't they? Yeah? So they can't deny that he exists. So if you say that I'm operating under God's law, they can't say, well, that's a load of crap because it doesn't exist. Well, all your commercial codes are based on it.
That's true.
So,
I don't want to take up much time. Thank you. Excellent explanation. Thank you so much.
Okay, no worries.
These are good questions, David. Thank you. And we can have as I say, we can tell you more about Pure for Planet Global Mission, privatize you, and basically move into a deeper relationship with this. Obadiah, you have a question. Can you ask to unmute you? There you go.
Yes, I do.
Welcome.
Thank you. And all this information is very informational and helpful, and I appreciate you all taking the time to share this with us. So I just had a brief question, because I heard what you said in reference to the young lady that was preparing to have a child. But for those of us that already have children, I've already established a trust. It may be different than the one you're speaking of. However, can I, as the owner of my trust, and I did get a birth certificate for my two children, utilize the Bible notice to take control of the children? So as opposed to having them being the possession of the state.
Okay, so you've got children already, have you? Or is it
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I have
Okay,
children
and
already.
they're certificated, aren't they?
And they're certificated. And what I'm asking is, can I bring them under my trust, in which I've notified the state that I am not their citizen, but basically a foreign national, or some people say sovereign.
Okay, so what you've got to think of is this. The simple answer to that is that, how old are they, first of all? How old are they?
2
Yeah.
and 2 months.
So 2 and 2 months, so they're dependent on you, yeah? Basically,
Yes.
yeah. So they can't make their own, until they come of age, they can't make their own choices, can they?
Correct.
Okay. So if you decided that they weren't wards of the state, which is what a child is, then you've got to rebut the presumption in law. Yeah? Because all law is about, all commercial codes are about a presumption of law, not the law. Courts don't operate under facts. They don't operate and preside over facts. They preside over controversy. So the controversy here is, if you decide that you're not going to do this, that, and the other, let's say it's a vaccination program, and you decided that your son and daughters are not going to go ahead with that, and the authorities say, but you have to. The Achilles heel of this arrangement, because the son and daughter can't say, I don't want to do it, because they haven't got the age of representation. So therefore, it's you that's in the firing line. So if you are the legal fiction, as we say, if you haven't rebutted that status of being a citizen, then you're part of their game. You're on the Monopoly board. You're the little board that's been going around that Monopoly board. So you have to, what we call, correct your status. And you have to serve them affidavits, as you would call them in the legal world, or affirmations in the law world, LORE, and you would rebut and put the record straight. Yeah? Because he that does not deny admits. Now, if you're now done that, and you say, look, I've done that, Darren, and I've rebutted that presumption, now you're sat in a different jurisdiction to what their codes, commercial codes, are sat in. And so therefore they're not nothing to do with you. The commercial code is for John Paul Smith, not for John Paul. So the answer to your question is, have you rescinded their presumption of you being employed by the state?
Okay. So before they were born, I had already corrected my status with the state. And
Well
in
done.
that, so in that, anything that belongs to me, or that's my possession, was included. So,
Exactly.
so now but I still want to correct their, so technically, and that's why I said the certificate of live birth that's in a Bible as my ownership in them. But I still want to but I still did the birth certificate so I can establish the trust with the state, and then be able to tap that, like the gentleman that was talking about sovereign, at some point in the future.
So what you do is basically that name, that surname of the baby, yeah?
Yes.
You make an affirmation that baby is John Paul rather than John Paul Smith, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
You put the Smith, you don't put the baby in the trust, you put the Smith in the trust.
Gotcha.
Yeah?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then all birth.
You can't put the baby in the trust because you don't own the baby. God owns the baby, if anybody, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can't put into a trust what you what you're actually doing, in actual fact, to be using the language properly, you're the trustee of that baby, aren't you? You're bringing it up until it becomes of age, and then it goes out in the world itself and makes a life. Yeah? So all you're doing is you're a caretaker or a custodian or a steward. That's all we ever are. Whether it's if it's a baby or whether it's a car or whether it's a house. We're only there for a temporary time. The land remains there forever.
Excellent. So we're going a little bit over. We got a few other questions here. Margarite, could you come out and talk to us a little bit? Just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What about the people that are on SSI and Medicare, people who've been injured by work and are now being supplemented by the state and the government, federal government?
When you say settlemented, what do you mean, like put in a home or something? Yeah.
No, they get benefits. They get state benefits.
Oh, benefits.
Or federal benefits.
This is a great question, you see, because what we were saying early on was that sometimes you've got to have a relationship with the state because it suits you. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah. So
Yes.
let's say that I need hospital treatment in Mexico, and I'm in England. So so I go to the authorities and say, you lot are set of so-and-sos, but I want to go to Mexico, but I haven't got a passport. They'll go, well, you can't go. Right? So out of necessity, I need a passport to get there, don't I? To save my life.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah? So
Yes.
I've got to get to Mexico. The hospital's a great hospital in Mexico, and I need to get there. And I've got to buy a ticket, and I've got to use fiat currency. I've got to use pound, and I'm using that. So when you really look at it, to get away from the state completely is a big ask at this moment, because the consciousness of the planet is actually subscribing to it and saying it's good, it's all right. So what I've got to do is I've got to do that out of necessity. Yeah. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I can still be sovereign. I can still have my benefits. Okay. Because that keeps me safe and fed and watered, which is a basic right of every man and woman. Okay. Right. And so I'm going to be a friend of the state just at the same time. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm going to do it out of necessity. That's called being smart.
Okay. Yes.
So you work with it. You pick your fights.
And you still have your
You know-
standing as a trustee. You haven't.
You still have your standing as a trustee, yeah, but you just don't tell the state that I think you're horrible and I don't want anything to do with you. Because what the state's going to do is say, well, you're not going to have your benefits then, get lost.
Right.
If you don't want to dine at the table, don't sit at it and eat at it. That's what they think.
Right.
Yeah, so you've got to pick your battles, you've got to pick your things. So, if I had, like, say, a criminal record, which I haven't, would I then, I'd be very careful if I had a baby boy or girl and how I went through correcting status, because that would be an Achilles heel for me. I'd need to get properly in a good jurisdiction. So it's not just, it's not just about like saying ta-ta to the state and we don't want to deal with you anymore. That's just not, in 2025, it's not practical in my opinion. You've got to work with it.
All right. So I
Excellent.
become a trustee. My last name then goes into the trust.
Yeah, this
I'm
is
a
this
teacher.
is phase 2, Marguerite. This is what we will talk about on our next call. And so I want to do 2 things. this was just to take a temperature to get who's interested. I've put in the chat my name, Pure for Planet Global Mission, our mission, and a direct access to me through the email. And that will open up a dialogue until we get a little bit more people, and I don't have to be answering the calls directly. And then we'll do a next call in class, so it might say, on, okay, what is the trust all about and what are the steps of it? And so there are 3 different levels of it. And, there's a basic, a standard, and a premium. And there's courses and curriculum that goes around that. And again, it's the most effective thing I've seen without the religious, there's a reason why there's limitations in the 508 and 508c1a, obviously, and the religious trust and corporation souls. And so we can talk about that more on our next conversation. And then Mary had a question, is it good all over the world? And the answer to that question is yes. And go ahead and answer that, Lauren.
Okay, so the answer to that is that the 3 things that we will teach people, and I'm not saying that as an ego thing, but it's just something that I've learned. There's 3 things we need to understand if we're going to correct the presumptions of that we are beholden to the state. And the 3 things are, we need to understand jurisdiction and what it truly is. Most people think jurisdiction is a land mass that they're living on. So you live in Georgia, I live in Northern Ireland or whatever, and that's the jurisdiction. But the jurisdiction's more finer than that, because you've got then the jurisdiction of law that's more important, just as a landmass. So jurisdiction is the first thing. The next thing we need to understand is grammar. We need to understand what has been said, what has been written, and the interpretation of that. And the third thing we need to understand is about title and perfecting titles. And that's, if you don't perfect the title and you don't, so there's guys, you see them all around the web, oh, get away from the state, don't be part of that. And then they separate it, they do ecclesiastical deed polls and this, that, and the other, and they separate it. And then I've had conversations with them and I say, well, now you've got, what you've done is, if we talk about the state being the pirate ship, and you've got to the ship's captain and said, right, I don't want to be part of that pirate ship. I want to go and float my own boat. Thank you very much. And pirate says, yeah, all right then, you can go. Look, there's a little dinghy out there. Off you go. And sail into the blue yonder, and off you go. So you go off, and you're now floating your boat, but you're free. Okay, and you think you that's it. And then 10 years later, you're not in that little dinghy anymore. You're in a big galleon. Okay, and you're swimming around the seas, and the pirates see you again because you haven't anchored the galleon, you haven't perfected the title, you haven't put it somewhere safe. They come out and then take your galleon off you, and they do what pirates do, pinch it back off you. And funnily enough, I was watching a series, and you guys will quite relate to this because it's called Bonanza. It was in the 70s, and I'm old enough to remember it. And it was quite an interesting thing, because on this episode, this guy had pinched some land, a ranch. And Horse Cartwright said, that's ours, that's part of the Ponderosa. And he goes, have you got the title for it? No, it was an agreement. It was a verbal agreement we've been between the guy and the guy that had it. He's died now, and it was an agreement, and we give him money for it. If you haven't got the title and it's perfected, he said this in Bonanza. He said, then you've got nothing. It's always been like that. So if we don't understand jurisdiction, titles, and language, then we're always going to be on that pirate ship.
Got it. Excellent. Okay, and as far as different parts of the world, we just have to get their operating procedures, their UCCs, their laws, and you can have it integrated for wherever they're located, correct?
Well, yeah, because we just, for a give example for the guys, we got a guy who was a Knights Templar. His family were Knights Templars back in the 11th century, and they came back from the Crusades, and they got a castle in Aberdeenshire, and it's been in the family ever since. And so he said, my son's getting divorced and the wife wants some money. And so I said, well, okay. And he said, but it's been in the family since 1170. And I said, well, then, if it's been in the family since 1170, there'll be a monastic order against it. He said, really? I said, yeah. So we got the seals that he's got. He's still got the original seals. And we dated back and we dated the jurisdiction back to that monastic order. So there's incredible things that you can do. Like you've just talked about the Maoris. So if you've got a Maori and you've got a treaty with the Maori, then we now can create that jurisdiction because you've now got a relationship with them. So you now look at the Maori Indigenous Law, LORE, and then you write the trust to that.
Right. Excellent.
Now you've got a different jurisdiction. That's what it's all
Okay.
about.
So thank you, everyone. We went a little bit over because of some of the questions, and it was a little bit later. Lydia, I'm just gonna say at this point, anybody that wants to leave the call is welcome to leave the call. You can get back through my webpage. I'm sorry, through my email address, or if Lydia was the person who invited you to this call or some other direction, then just contact me directly. However you got here, just go back to that source. Lydia, do you want to ask a practical question about what you wanted to do with the farm? Or do you want to have that held for another time? Liddy?
Sorry, I am driving. I wasn't not even able to open up, so I apologize. And I'm going to say I have great gratitude. And I know that this is going to be for my whole entire family. And I'm just filled with gratitude. Thank you, Darren. This was very clear, very succinct, and I get it. I think for the first time on another level. Thank you.
Okay. So Liddy, I'm going to go ahead when this records. I'm going to send this out to you. This is a discussion. This is a debate. This is part of a service that Pure for Planet Global Mission and the Trust Society Institute will be offering. Anybody that wants to have a deeper conversation with us can easily come on through either you or some of the other sources here. My email address is mhbennet. That's Michael Hayden Bennett, but it's mhbennet for now, until it reverts to Michael Hayden. And Pure for Planet Global, so PUREFOR Planet, PLANET.org. We're an educational society. We currently are a corporate soul in a 508. And again, mhbennet at PUREFOR Planet.org. Get back to myself or get back to Liddy, and we'll deal down with much more practicality. We'll go offline. We'll talk, and we'll have a next class or a let me say next level sorting process here. People that say, yes, I'm really interested. I want specifics. Can you break down the difference between the basic, the standard, and the premium? And the operating function there has to do with assets and how many assets you're bringing to the table, because based on that, you'll want to look at premium versus standard. And then the basic is just so you have a trust. Oh, Gloria and Fire have a question. Okay. So again, I've closed this off. So for those of you that want to leave, don't accuse us of us going over an hour other than time that we took. Trying to create a new policy here. But in the meantime, if you want to stay and ask a question, you're certainly allowed to do that. So go ahead, Gloria.
Well, I just wanted to say, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I apologize earlier. I know you were asking us if we had any questions. We are also driving, so I wasn't able, I was trying to reach it to get the mute off. But I just wanted to say, I'm very excited the fact that you have, because it was explained very well, but I am more of a visual learner than an audio learner. So I'm really excited about the curriculum. And I was just wondering, do you know when about you'll actually have the curriculum that we can follow along with? Do you think it'll be by the next meeting, or how much further down the road do you believe that is?
Well, Darren, you have some of that prepared already, right? So
yeah, we already write them in the UK and we get people all over the world come to. The idea is, to answer your question quickly, is what the part of the curriculum is to have trustees that understand what they're doing, because it's not just setting up a trust, it's knowing how to run it. And we want the next generation, of trustees so they can keep that baton running and carrying this information on so it doesn't get lost.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, as you can see, this is and I know you well enough to know, Glory, that and Fire, that we know what divine timing is, and we know that those of you that can sense this, I can really feel it now. Holy Spirit just walked right into my body. Whoa. That we're, that this is the next part of the evolutionary process for us as trustees, that we first of all have to define the fact that we are trustees. That's a big thing to put it out there. So the next step is to then begin to gather now, who are the people that have been, shall we say, charged to come to this party? Who are these warriors that want to take the next step? What are the practicalities involved with that? And also, what is the spirit involved with that? So, if you're raising your hand on that, sort of say on an etheric level and a physical level, then let me know, and at mhbennet@peerforplanet.org, or just call me if you know me personally, or call Lydia, whoever it might be, and we'll set up that next phase. But it won't be long, because Darren and I have finally gotten to this place where we can do this, and I would say it's going to explode. In fact, I'm certain it's going to explode. So it's just that people need to get their head wrapped around it for a teeny bit. And we need to get the structures in place to privatize you, which I'm going to go to next. And so we're building a master trust together for Peer for Planet Global Mission. And your trustee will be overseen by Peer for Planet Global Mission, which will also have a foundation on First Nations cosmology. So it'll be quite exquisite, actually, when it comes to jurisdiction.
And the other thing, that just so that people know, is that when we weave that cosmology into the trust, by the way, we know how to do it.
Yeah. And it's no problem to work with wherever you are. If you're a New Zealander, if you're an Australian person, if you're a Ecuadorian, a Colombian, all of this follows that same road back to Caesar. And so because if you think about it, that's what everything was before. So that's where the secretness and the transparency stand next to each other. So it's all can be sourced from there. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your own spiritual work and your own evolution right now. And realize this is absolutely the result of what has been happening on the planet, that we now have to claim the role of trustee so we can stand in that place on all areas of our life. So thank you so much for your time. Just let me know we'll let you know what the next step is. Darren and I are working behind the scenes to define that. And again, it's very important to everything that we privatize. So the next step, again, discussions will be discussions, but when we take actions and go into the services, you have to be a private member of Peer for Planet Global Mission. Okay, take care for now. Have a great day. Darren, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Much over there. Take care of the dog, and I'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers.